Today we are going to work through the InDesign Workspace. This introduction to the program will help you prepare for your upcoming assignments, while also preparing you for the Adobe test at the end of the semester. To start, we're going to learn how to open the InDesign program and get logged in. First, you will need to open Creative Cloud from the Application folder, which is here, or by clicking on the cloud icon at the top menu bar. Once you have the login screen open, you will need to press Sign in with Enterprise ID. You will then enter your school email address, first name underscore last name underscore graduation year underscore or at nobl.k12.in.us. Press enter. You will not enter your password here. This will take you to the screen that will redirect you to sign into your school email account through Enterprise ID. When you see this screen, you're ready to open the Adobe software. It is extremely important that when you are finished using the software at the end of every class, that you log out. So you would simply click on the cloud at the top, click on this icon that indicates your account, and you would press sign out. If you do not, the next person that sits at your computer will be signed in as you and be able to.
Now you are going to be introduced to the InDesign Workspace. Let's get started. First, you'll need to launch the InDesign application. So you can do that by going to the Application folder, clicking on InDesign, and then clicking on this icon to open it. Or the easier way is to go to the magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner and type InDesign in, and it will come up. Once you launch the application, you should see the following window. For our purposes today, we're going to work with a document that's already created so that you can see how the different tools should work. At the top of the toolbar, go to the File menu and press Open. The document we are looking for is on your desktop, and it is called Rocket Report Final. This is a newsletter that we will use to learn how to navigate the program. So once you find the file, click on it and press Open. This newsletter is actually 4 pages, so let's start by seeing how to navigate from page to page. At the bottom of your window, there are navigation icons that are triangles. If I click on the right pointing triangle, I can go to the next page and I can keep paging through that way. Likewise, there's a left pointing triangle where I can page backwards. These arrows work fine for a 4-page document, but if I have a lot of pages in my document, I would want to navigate between them a little quicker. So in that same area, you'll see a down pointing triangle. If I click on that, I'll get a pop-up list of all of my pages, so I can move through them in a non-sequential order. Now that we know how to navigate through our pages, let's take a look at the workspace. Across the top of your screen, you have a control bar. This control bar is dynamic and will change depending on what tool you are using. Right now, I'm in the Select tool, so the options in the control bar are appropriate for that tool. But if I choose the Type tool, you'll see the control bar just changed. We can control how the control bar looks by selecting different tools. In the case of the Type tool, this control bar actually has 2 different views we can look at. At the left end, you will see a big capital A button. If I click on that button, it takes me to the paragraph formatting controls. This is where we can justify the paragraphs, align items, add space before or after paragraphs, or adjust anything that affects how the paragraphs are formatted. The Type tool is the only control bar that has 2 different views. Underneath the capital A, you'll see the paragraph button. If I click on this button, it takes me to the paragraph formatting controls. This is where we can justify the paragraphs, align items, add space before or after paragraphs, or adjust anything that affects how paragraphs are formatted. Like I said, the type tool is the only tool that has two different control bars. As I said earlier, the control bar is dynamic and will change depending on which tool you're working with. So if I switch over to the line tool, the options would change to what is appropriate for working with lines and strokes. Down the right side of your screen are the panels that help us work within the program. Adobe tries to help us with our workflow by giving us different workspaces. When you first launch the program, Adobe suggests that you work in the Essential workspace, and you can see that right up here. For most of the class and training in this software, we're going to use the Advanced workspace. Yeah, that's right, you're already advanced, and we just learned how to open the program. So to get there, we would just click on the word and click on Advanced. Now the way the panels work is that if I click on one of the panels, it's going to open up a detailed view of that panel. For instance, I just clicked on the Pages panel, and I now have a detailed view of the pages in the document. I can size the panel up and down depending on how much of the panel I want to see, or in this case, how many pages I need to see. Now, if I want to look at another panel in that group, you can see certain panels are grouped together by separation of these lines. I can simply look at the tabs across the top of the open panel to navigate between the panels in that group. Clicking on these tabs will show us the details in another panel and hide the panel that we were looking at. If I want to collapse the panel, I can simply click on the double-headed arrow at the top of the panel. Now I'm going to reopen the Pages panel to point out that at the top of any panel, there's a menu that you can access. You can access this menu by clicking on the button that looks like horizontal little parallel lines. Each panel is going to have an options menu, and depending on the panel you're in, you can do different things. So in the Pages panel, we can add pages, move pages, duplicate things, delete. So it just depends on what panel we're in. On the left side of your screen, you'll find the toolbar. When you first launch InDesign, the toolbar will appear in a long single column. You can view the toolbar in a number of different ways. A lot of people like to view the toolbar in a double column format. If I click on the double-headed arrow at the top of the toolbar, it will make it a double column format. You also have the option to make the toolbar horizontal across the top of your screen. The view doesn't matter, and it's completely up to you. If you view the toolbar in a double column view, it's easier to work with the indicators you see here for fill and stroke. Later we're going to work with these tools, so it's important you know where they are. Now we're going to look at the zoom tool. If I want to see my document a little bit closer, there's a way that I can zoom in and out to see different areas. For this, I'll use the zoom tool. The zoom tool is the magnifying glass, which is right here. If I click on the magnifying glass and then drag the magnifying glass over the top of the document that I want to see, it will zoom in on that particular section. I can also use keyboard commands to do this. So I can press the command and the plus sign on my keyboard to zoom in, and command and minus to zoom out. I can also press command and 0 to see the whole document. Alright, now we're going to learn how to create a new document. So I'm going to go up to File, New, Document. When the panel opens, I have the ability to choose what kind of document I'm going to create. For this particular section, we're going to create a print document, but I could make a web document or a mobile document, but print is the most common. You can then put the number of pages that you suspect that you are going to use, but you don't have to do this, as you can add pages later, so we're going to keep it at 1. Right here you'll see facing pages. That means that I can have a left and a right facing page that are right next to each other. For yearbook design, you will always use facing pages. But this is not the case for all projects that we'll do. So just make sure that you look at the directions. You can also change your page size. You can choose a standard size or a custom size. For our purchases, we're going to use a standard letter size most often. By default, the measurements here are not in inches but in picas. Often we use picas, but it's also good to know how to change those measurements. I'll show you how to change those with your rulers in a few minutes. You can also change the orientation to portrait or landscape. You can adjust the number of columns and the margins on your page. But you don't have to do that because we can change those once we get the document started. Later, we'll talk about bleed and slug area, but we're going to hold off on that for now. Once everything is set the way that you want it, go ahead and press create. Now notice at the top, the blank page made a new tab. Each new document will create a new tab if you keep the other documents open. This makes it easy to move through them quickly. If there's ever a time that you don't want a document in tabs, but instead want them floating in the windows, you can change that view by going to Window, Arrange, Float All in Windows. This would separate the windows out. If you want to re-merge them, you could take the title bar of one document and move it close to the title bar of the other one, and you can see here that they're going to merge together, and then it'll move them back to using tabs. Now that you have a blank document, we're going to look at the rulers. You'll notice that the ruler isn't measuring in inches, they're measuring in picas. Picas are a standard unit of measurement for design. There are 6 picas in an inch, 12 points or pixels in a pica. So that means there are 72 points or pixels per inch. Some people are more comfortable working in inches, and that's totally fine. So now we're going to see how to change the ruler to measure in inches. There are a couple ways to do this. The first way is to go to InDesign at the top of the window and click on Preferences. Then go to Units and Increments. This is where you'll see the ruler units, horizontal and vertical. You can see it says pica, and we can just click on the downward facing arrow and change that to inches. That's easy enough. And then we'll press OK. Now you can see the ruler looks like it's measuring in inches. We can change the preferences while we have the document open. So that means that these preferences will only hold for this document. So if I start another document, that document would go back to picas. Another way to change the rulers is by right-clicking on the ruler, and you can see a right click brings up a menu where you can easily change that, and it works the same way for the vertical and the horizontal. Now we're going to learn about the tools in the toolbar. Notice that some of the tools have a little triangle in the lower right-hand corner. Any tool that you see that has a little triangle means that you can click and hold on that tool and see a tool group. For example, the rectangle tool is grouped with the ellipse and the polygon tool. Adobe tries to group similar tools together. We're going to start with the rectangle tool and simply draw a shape on the page. It doesn't matter the size that it is. It can be any size. So we're just going to click on the document and drag to make a rectangle. By default, your rectangle should have been created with no fill. It has a blue edge on it, and that's actually the frame edge. Every object lives in a frame, and a frame is a container. Later, we will learn how to hide the frame edge, but for now, we're going to leave it. Right now, your frame is empty. If you go back to the selection tool and double click and click outside of the frame, it will deselect the rectangle. If I want to select the rectangle, I would need to click on the border to reselect it and get selection handles back. If I can't click in the middle because it's not full. I have to click on the edge if I want to change anything about it. One change I might want to make is to fill the rectangle. This is where the two indicators at the bottom of the toolbar come into play. By default, the one on the top right now is the fill indicator. At the moment, it shows no fill, and that's what the red line through it means. My choices are down here in these three small icons. The first one is the black square, which means I want to apply color. So I'm going to click on it and it will fill it. The default that it filled with is black. Now the other two choices, I can fill it with a gradient. We'll look more at gradients in a minute. Or I could go back to no fill. First, let's talk about fill colors. I'm going to click on the apply color button again that filled it with plain black. But what if I don't want the rectangle to be black? Let's talk about other colors. That's in the swatches panel. To bring up the swatches panel, you just click on the panel over here, and it shows the default color swatches in InDesign that are given to us. And notice their names are based in CMYK, or ink language. It gives us these default options, but what if I don't like those? I might want to add a different color. For that, we can go to the option menu, so that's these parallel lines, in the swatches panel. I would choose new color swatch, and it will bring up a panel where I can define the new swatch. When I look at the color type, I have process color and spot color. Process means that you're using all four inks and you're mixing them together to use full color printing. If your project is only going to have two colors, for instance, you would use spot color. You can also use the color mode to look through the various different palettes to add colors. If I want to add a new color, I could try and use the sliders in the CMYK, but that's difficult for me at least. So under the color mode, I can select one of the hundreds of colors in the different panels. Select the color and then press add. This will add it to the swatches panel of your document, so you now have it to use. Now let's talk about gradients. I'm going to fill or apply gradient button. Gradient means that colors can blend together. If I need to alter or edit the gradient, I can do so in the gradient panel on the right. Click on the gradient panel gives me those controls. I'm going to remove the gradient panel from the group just by clicking and dragging the panel out of the panels table. I'm going to do this because I want to have this panel and the swatches panel open at the same time. So you can see they're covered up by each other, so I can just move this down and then open the swatches. So if I want my gradient to be the new color I selected and dissolve into white, I'm going to right click on the end of the gradient control panel, and you'll see that the little square with the triangle at the top becomes selected. Now, when I select the left end, you will see how the triangle becomes black or selected. That means that is the marker you're going to choose. With all of my swatches, I can simply click and drag the swatch down onto the marker to change the gradient. So I'm just going to click and drag it and it makes it that color. The diamond in the middle is the controller, so you can decide where the blend is actually going to happen. So if I move it over, the blend happens closer to the color. If I move it to the left, it happens closer to the white, but I'm going to leave it close to the middle here. You can also click to put a new marker on the control strip, so I can put any color swatch in my gradient. So I'm going to add this red, and you can see that I clicked and dragged and it added it to the gradient. You can really customize your gradients and do cool things. Today you learned how to navigate the workspace. You learned how to use the panels and customize them for your own use. You also learned how to use tools and how to use the view of the document in different sizes. Later on, we're going to learn more of the InDesign tools in the workspace, but this is just a basic